Okay, so ready to get out of the studio and into the jungle.
Always up for an adventure.
This time, we're ditching those glossy travel brochures, those picture-perfect paradise shots, going deep, raw into the real deal of jungle life. And we've got some amazing National Geographic exploration as our guide.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Really gets under the surface of what we think we know about these places.
Right, like everyone pictures lush, vibrant ecosystems teeming with life. But it's way more intense than that. It's a constant battle for survival. We're talking wildlife war zone levels of fierce.
Exactly. That's what we're unpacking today. How even in the most seemingly abundant environments, every single creature is facing incredible pressure just to exist. We're going to explore the forces at play here, the extremes of weather, the relentless competition, and how all that's being amplified by, the whole global change situation. It's
Big
complex.
time. And to guide us through this, our main source today is a super detailed video transcript. It's packed with vivid examples of jungle life, all narrated by experts. So we're in good hands.
Absolutely. Solid source material for a deep dive.
One of the things that jumped out at me right away was how the transcript cuts through the romanticism. It straight up says, the jungle is no animal Eden, no walk in the park, it's a fight.
Yeah.
What hit you hardest about that initial portrayal of the environment itself?
I think it was just how unforgiving it all is. You've got the torrential rain, the heat, the insects. It's like the environment itself is pushing back against life
Really?
constantly. Totally. And then you see the consequences of inexperience, like with those young Aang, remember?
Right, right.
A third of them don't even make it. It's just brutal. Shows you there's no room for error out there.
High stakes all the time.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how even something as basic as water, something we associate so strongly with rainforests, becomes a pressure point.
Oh, absolutely. We tend to think of these places as just drenched all the time, but they have dry seasons too, right?
Yeah.
Big shift in the whole dynamic. Suddenly, the rivers, which are normally lifelines, they turn into battlegrounds.
Makes sense. You've got all that life concentrated around a shrinking resource.
Hmm.
And, where there's limited resources, there's going to be competition, especially between predators and prey.
For sure.
The transcript highlights the jaguar as this, ultimate predator in South America. But even at the top of the food chain, they're constantly hustling. What were some of the things about the jaguar's life that you found most interesting?
Honestly, it was the fact that even a jaguar, this apex predator, can go days without a kill.
Wow.
Shows you how efficient and competitive that ecosystem is. Like a missed opportunity, it's not just a bummer, it has serious
It
consequences.
keeps everything in check.
Right. And I thought it was cool how they're the most aquatic of the big cats.
Yeah. Their willingness to hunt in the water opens up a whole new menu, right? Like
Mhm.
capybara.
Hmm.
But does specializing like that make them less equipped to go after other prey? Are there trade-offs?
I mean, it's possible. Maybe they're not as agile on land chasing, say, a really fast animal, but being so good in the water lets them exploit niches that other predators can't. Less competition, although
Even with that advantage, they still have to compete with other jaguars.
always rivals.
Yeah, and that constant hunger, that need to eat, it pushes them into riskier situations, like
Yeah.
hunting in less frequented waters.
Which is where, as the narration puts it, prehistoric killers love waiting.
Exactly.
The caiman.
Oh man, that footage of the jaguar taking down a caiman, I was on the edge of my seat. Talk about power and determination. But so much risk too, right?
Every hunt is a gamble. And those risks, they just keep increasing as the dry season drags on. Food becomes even scarcer. The transcript then shifts focus to animals like the orangutan and how much they rely on fruit. 60% of their diet.
It's a big chunk.
It is. And I was blown away by the sheer brain power it takes for an orangutan to survive on that diet. They have this complex mental map of where the fruit is, and it takes years to build.
Years. It's not just strength and agility, it's about intelligence.
Right. And the crazy thing is, with less and less rainfall, with more droughts, that mental map becomes less reliable. Yeah, the predictability of the food sources just goes down, makes survival that much harder.
It's like the stakes are constantly being raised. And you know what else blew my mind? How little sunlight actually reaches the forest floor.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge factor. Most people don't realize that.
Right. We think of these places as so lush, but the canopy blocks out most of the light. So down at the bottom, it's not just about finding water, it's about accessing that fundamental energy source, the sunlight. The transcript mentions that only 1 in 100,000 seeds actually makes it to the canopy. That's insane. What are some of the other ways plants have adapted to overcome those odds? Beyond just producing tons of seeds, I mean.
Well, some have evolved to be dispersed by wind, others hitch a ride on animals, even if those animals might eat them eventually.
Clever.
And timing is everything. Releasing seeds at just the right time when conditions are favorable. It's a whole war in which every leaf matters, as the transcript puts it. They're all fighting for a spot in the sun.
A war for sunlight. And when the more palatable stuff is gone, herbivores are forced to turn to, well, less appealing options.
Which brings us to the world of plant defenses.
Right, all those spikes and poisons. The transcript paints a pretty vivid picture of animals getting sick from those toxins. And then, the desperate search for the antidote, clay.
It's so fascinating how this seemingly basic substance, clay, is so crucial. Animals will risk their lives going on these dangerous journeys to clay licks, all while exposed to predators like ocelots, jaguars, even pumas.
Just to detox.
Yeah. You see, clay particles can actually bind to and neutralize certain toxins in their digestive systems. It's like a natural remedy. And the longer the dry season, the more often they have to make these risky trips.
It really highlights that constant pressure to survive. But it's not all doom and gloom, right? There are also amazing adaptations, like the orangutan spending 90% of its life in the trees.
Yeah, that's wild. They're the heaviest arboreal species. Arboreal just means living in trees, so that's a huge adaptation. They use their weight to conserve energy, swinging through the branches.
Smart.
And their nesting behavior, weaving those branches high up, keeps them safe from ground predators. But you know what I found most insightful? The connection between the trees themselves and the weather.
Tell me about it. The idea that the jungle is actually creating its own weather patterns. They release all this water vapor, which leads to the wet season. And the scary part is, as jungles shrink, so does that rainmaking power.
Exactly. It affects everything, not just the jungle itself. And we see adaptations for every time of day, too, like the spectral tarsier, those huge eyes, perfectly adapted for the night.
Oh yeah, those eyes. They can hunt so effectively in the dark, especially during a full moon.
Right. But that reliance on moonlight also makes them vulnerable when clouds roll in. It's all about balance. And when the moon is obscured, the advantage shifts to predators like the python, which hunt using heat and smell.
It's like a constant back and forth, who has the upper hand at any given moment. And to counter that, the tarsiers have developed this collective vigilance through their group living.
So how does that collective vigilance work? Are they like taking turns keeping watch, or is it more of a constant shared awareness kind of thing?
Seems like it's a bit of both. Having multiple individuals on alert increases the odds of spotting danger early. And if one spots something and vocalizes, it alerts the whole group instantly. They can escape together. But then the wet season arrives and things get kicked up a notch. The transcript says it's hitting harder than ever before.
It really does feel that way. And that statistic about lightning strikes, it's alarming. Jungles have the highest frequency globally, and it's only going to increase.
Nature's power on full display. And even though the fall of those emergent trees, those giants that tower above the canopy, can be destructive in the short term, the transcript presents it as an essential part of the life cycle. Decomposition, nutrient recycling, all that.
Right. It all comes back to balance, and that's where fungi come in. The sheer diversity is mind-blowing. They actually outnumber plants in some jungles, and they break down organic matter so quickly. And they've evolved so many different ways to spread their spores, ensuring they get everywhere.
Fungi are like the ultimate recyclers.
Totally. But then you've got the parasitic fungi, too, the cordyceps, for example.
Right.
The way it takes over an ant, controlling its behavior to spread its spores, it's incredible and kind of creepy.
Zombie ants.
Yeah.
And there are over 600 species of cordyceps, each targeting different hosts.
It's a whole world of mind control.
Wow. Up in the canopy, during the wet season, we see the gibbons in action. So agile, so fast, even while carrying their young. But the fact that their forests are being fragmented, that's a huge danger.
It is. Human impact just adds to the challenges they're already facing.
Right, they're navigating a complex world, and now we're making it even harder for them to move around safely. And then there's the erratic rainfall.
Yeah, those short, intense bursts can make travel really treacherous.
And then there's that image of the orangutan using leaves as an umbrella. So simple, but so smart.
They're so adaptable. And then you've got creatures like the hummingbird living right on the edge.
Those tiny birds, with their crazy high metabolisms, they need to eat constantly, and they weigh less than a nickel.
Imagine the energy it takes them to stay airborne in a downpour. And even then, they're still competing for nectar.
Those buff-tailed coronets guarding their flowers.
But the racquet-tail hummingbirds, they're so persistent. They find ways to sneak in and get their share, shows you the lengths they'll go to for survival.
It does. But the interconnectedness of these ecosystems, it goes way beyond a single jungle. The transcript talks about how rainfall in the Andes can affect the Amazon basin thousands of miles away.
It's amazing, right? That rainfall can cause the Earth's crust to actually sink, leading to widespread flooding.
It's wild. And life adapts, like the sloths suddenly becoming surprisingly good swimmers in these flooded forests.
Yeah, the fermentation in their stomachs makes them buoyant.
Who knew?
And they can move 3 times faster in the water than on land. The flooded forest creates a whole new environment, and they've adapted to it, just like the pink river dolphins, using their echolocation to navigate those submerged trees.
Incredible. But the scary part is, those extreme weather events, they're becoming more and more common. The floods, the droughts.
Speaking of droughts, the transcript calls it the single biggest threat to jungles worldwide.
And they use Australia as a cautionary tale.
Yeah, once upon a time, Australia's jungles were even bigger than the Amazon. Now only 1% remains.
1%.
It's sobering. And then you've got those little red flying foxes struggling in the extreme heat. Anything over 104 degrees Fahrenheit, they're at risk of heat shock.
It's awful. And then, to find water, they have to risk going to crocodile-infested rivers.
The transcript says that in the next 50 years, conditions might be too harsh for entire colonies to survive.
It's heartbreaking. And, it's easy to get lost in the individual stories, but we have to remember the bigger picture. The transcript circles back to the essential role jungles play.
Right. They're not just beautiful and fascinating, they're vital for all of us. The oxygen they produce, the rain.
They regulate the whole planet's climate.
Exactly. And all those amazing adaptations we talked about, they're a double-edged sword. They make those species perfectly suited to their environment, but also incredibly vulnerable to change.
So those challenges faced by a young Agang, they're only going to intensify with climate change and deforestation.
Yeah, the future of these incredible places, it's more uncertain than ever.
We've seen how jungles are so much more than just beautiful landscapes. They're arenas of constant struggle and adaptation, a delicate balance that's being disrupted.
It makes you think, what's our responsibility here?
Exactly. So here's something to ponder. We've seen how even seemingly small environmental shifts can have these huge ripple effects in these wildlife war zones. Knowing that, what do we owe these incredible resilient ecosystems? And what might happen on a global scale if we fail to act? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, folks. It's been real.
Until next time.